fact, millions of children struggle with learning to read. Often there's frustration, setbacks before they even start school, not just on an individual level, but for their families. And a groundbreaking new app developed by brain scientists and backed by decades of research is changing the game, literally and figuratively. Joining me to discuss the science behind early literacy, the impact of dyslexia, and how innovative technology is helping to prevent reading struggles before they actually start is Dr. Tim Conway, CEO of the Morse Center, Ponte Vedra Beach, and Karen Elliott, mother of 3 school-aged children and a proud fan. I welcome you both to First Coast Connect this morning.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
You are very, very welcome. Dr. Conway, let's start with you. You are a world-renowned expert in dyslexia. First of all, before we bust into this, just give us the poor man's version of dyslexia. What is it defined as?
It really just means you have one of 3 troubles, either poor reading accuracy, poor reading speed, or poor reading comprehension. And it doesn't mean you see things backwards. That's what the media keeps putting out there on TV shows and on the simulations on the computer. It's not a visual problem. It's a difficulty in being able to sound out words.
All right. And now neurodevelopmental disorders. We went from like 2 lanes to 20 lanes of traffic, it seems, in the last 5 to 10 years with neurodiversity. And so help us also now understand the definition of neurodevelopmental disorders.
It just means difficulties that are genetic. We get to tell kids, hey, if you have trouble reading, you know who you can blame? The kids are like, no. I'm like, it's mom or dad. He said, but you know who they can blame? It's grandma or grandpa. Don't worry about it. Just family genetics. And that genetics gives you a predisposition that you're either going to be strong or something or weaken something. Yeah. And the good news is we find the weaknesses, we can make them stronger.
Now, I have the luxury of having met you, watched you in action, seen you, watched your videos. You are passionate and you're a technician. You're I'm sure near genius level, whatever your IQ.
I don't know that.
Yeah, but there's a passion driving this, and tell us a little bit about that, because that is so much the embodiment of your work.
100%. You have to understand, Al, that I'm second generation of doing this. My aunt and uncle were world famous for their work in dyslexia, and thank goodness, because dyslexia, it doesn't run in my family, it gallops. So I'm dyslexic, but I got prevention at age 5. So because of that, I've never struggled to read and spell. And then fast forward a few decades, I have 2 children. Both of them got my genetics. Both of them got dyslexia as well. So lucky me, lucky them, we don't struggle. My kids actually excelled through school, went to advanced placement high school positions, and both went to the university on scholarships. Every parent's dream. But what about all the other kids? What about all the other kids who may not have access to those early services? And that's why we've been building the companies. We built nowprograms.com as an ed tech online to deliver services around the world. And now we've got Lip Letterland, the app that can actually help 3, 4, 5, and 6-year-olds not struggle.
And I want to pause you there. We could do 7 hours on the incredible programs and work you've done. Today's focus is really about Lip Letterland. But Karen, I want to first ask you, how did you come to meet Dr. Morris and Dr. Conway and the Morris Centers?
So, ironically, I was online. I was an educator first, and my children were having struggles. Biggest one was my son. He wasn't able to read, and I'd done everything I could to help him as an educator, a special educator at that. And when you go to school and you learn about teaching, dyslexia comes up, but you don't spend a lot of time on it, how to remediate it, how to intervene. I'm not one to want to, help a kid. I want to close gaps.
Yeah.
And I wasn't able to find a program that would allow me to close the gap for my kid. I was searching online at all these programs, and none of them had any kind of studies or research behind them, nothing scientific, but just, oh, this program is evidence-based or research-based. Well, show me the research, and I couldn't find it. I joined every group possible, and I ran across somebody just said Now Programs, Morris Center, and I started researching. Guess what I found?
So as you're doing this research, because I want to speak to the parents that may be listening right now, and they're in that void. They're in that gap, right? And we talked about the traffic. Am I to understand that amid all of these different quote unquote searches, you didn't find this gap? Why do you think that was?
It didn't exist. Like, there was not research sitting there to show me that if I put these children in a group and I
Mhm.
give them this reading program, they're absolutely going to make gains. I
Yeah.
wasn't finding that until I found this program. I could actually see a study that had been done that was randomized and controlled. And maybe it's because I'm a sociology major. I wanted to see data
Right.
and study.
Yeah.
And I was able to find it. And I said, well, the worst thing that could happen is I try it and it doesn't work. But according to the study, it should.
All right. So obviously, I'm with two people who have excessively done their homework, which makes me feel so in right field because I never did my homework as a kid. Um, but I struggled, and in reading and listening to what you've created, I like, wow, I wish that was around when I was a kid.
Right.
But you really have attacked these issues from three different approaches. So tell us about, you've got the Morris Center, the Now programs, and the Einstein School. And of
Mhm.
course, we're going to talk about Lip Letter Land.
Sure.
Amazing. But what are those projects and what unites them?
So the Morris Center opened in 1986,
Mhm.
and it's a developmental team of experts in speech pathology, the language experts, OT, the sensory motor, attention regulation experts, psychology, the mood behavior experts, who are all cross-trained together. And I joined the Morris Center in 1989, right out of undergrad. And so then we started doing research, and we published 3 5-year, what are called randomized controlled trial research studies. Best way to explain that is to say that's the science that built penicillin, and pretty much any medication or any medical treatment comes from that caliber of research. The big famous Yale Center for Dyslexia has a pediatrician named Dr. Sally Shaywitz. She advocates that only randomized controlled trials, levels of research, gives parents the confidence to know, like Karen said, the program should work because we've got evidence and strong proof that it's going to work. So then we opened the Einstein School right after we published our first study, showing we could take kids from the 5th percentile in reading to the 45th percentile with even just a small dose of the instruction. That dose was no more than 80 hours, basically
Oh.
8 weeks.
Wow.
Kids got 2 hours a day, 5 days a week for 8 weeks, and the average gain was from the 5th percentile in reading skills to the 45th, which means they're rock solid on grade level.
And over 8 weeks.
Yeah, that's it, just 8 weeks. But then the real measure of the effectiveness of a dyslexia intervention is what happens 1 year later, 2 years later. And we measured those data points with those 8 to 10-year-olds, and they kept getting stronger and stronger. So we opened the Einstein School as the very first free charter school in all of the United States, only for kids with dyslexia. And it's in Gainesville, Florida. It's been there for 25 years. I'm one of the founders, and I'm the president of the board as a voluntary board member. And every kid gets the services there for free. It's got 120 kids in grades 2 through 8. And our goal was maybe it's going to launch dissemination to other schools. But what most people don't understand is healthcare and education have one major difference. Healthcare has to be evidence-based as much by randomized controlled trials as possible. Education doesn't require that. Anybody can make up any program you want. If the school buys it, your kid's going to get it. And it doesn't have to have any proof that it actually works at all.
Is that really is that really at the core of what this what I'm hearing is that this is a deviation in a belief system of learn versus health. Is it really that simple?
It really is. Yeah. If you go back and study the history of physicians,
Mhm.
you'll find out that early on, 1700s, you became a physician by finding somebody in town who thought they were a physician, and people thought they were a physician, and they would teach you what they thought was medicine.
Right.
We had really high mortality rates because a lot of them were wrong. The stuff
Yeah.
they were doing was not effective. And then medicine got pushed into becoming evidence-based, and it gets better every year. Every decade it's stronger, better diagnosis, better treatments, better outcomes. But that standard does not exist in education.
Karen, I'd like to hark on what you said, which is, you're a sociologist by trade, correct? Okay. You obviously are invested personally. So before we get into a little bit more about Lip Letter Land, and also I'm going to open up the lines here in a moment for folks to call in with questions. But what is it you as a parent would want to share with other parents or family members or educators or practitioners? Because you've experienced this not once, twice, but with all three of your children, correct?
All three.
Yeah. So just walk us very briefly through that journey of your experience with those three kids, and then what you want to share that you've learned from a data standpoint.
So when I say sociology, that's what I studied in college.
Okay.
But I've taught in public schools for a very long time.
Okay.
I'm not in the school systems any longer. My kids get all of me now. So for me, my journey was more so working in special education, working with children who are neurodiverse,
Mm.
and seeing them fail. I worked a lot with children who made a lot of gains. However, when you sit and you watch reading instruction done, knowing how teachers are taught to read, taught to teach reading. Yes, there are programs that teach you, but when you have a child that doesn't fit into the science of reading or whatever system it is, because they have this underlying neurological weakness, and you're not specifically trained in how to do that, and you're not using a program that's designed to close that gap for them, what happens? Their delay continues. Their confidence, where is it at? They
Oh,
lose
yeah.
it,
Yeah.
right? And then school becomes too hard and they give up, right? I was seeing my children go through that. That's the long and short of it. My kid was in first grade being told, well, you should be able to do this. We showed you.
Mm.
And then, well, here's the word blue. Read it to me. We've been practicing it. Why can't you do that?
Wow.
And him saying, Mommy, I just need a bath. I'm just so sad.
Mm.
That's not how kids learn.
Yeah.
That's not what's okay. And to no fault, it's not the teacher's fault. No one's, out there trying to be mean to children, but children take in things different than we as adults do a lot of times. So I'm not mad at anyone or upset. But if you're not trained in this and you don't have something behind it to really show what's going to help them,
Yeah.
they're not going to get what they need. So, that was a story. And I choose my son because that was when it really became a big deal. My daughter was older. Hers was in comprehension. She took every test there was and couldn't pass it because she couldn't comprehend what she was reading.
Wow, that's just heartbreaking. I mean, as a parent, and even if you're not a parent, you know that pain. And shoot, I mean, I remember sitting in the classroom myself. I was able to verbalize,
Mm-hmm.
but framing things sometimes visually was just a nightmare for me. So, hey, listen, we have got some great conversation going on. We're about to unpack this incredible new app called Lip Letter Land. If you'd like to join us, please do so. You can call us at 904-549-2937. You can also email us at firstcoastconnect@wjct.org and participate in the conversation. So, Dr. Conway, Lip Letter Land. First of all, cool name. But what is this? And tell us what it works.
Well, this is an early literacy app that is to help children build the speech processing skills that you actually need before you get to the reading skills.
Okay.
Easy way to say it is everybody's brain learns how to speak first and reading comes later on. The number one predictor of your reading skills has nothing to do with letters. It has to do with how well you can perceive sounds in words and judge sounds just being changed. It's kind of like saying you had friends who could do Pig Latin and you had friends who couldn't.
Yeah.
Well, the ones who couldn't do Pig Latin are struggling with that speech processing piece. They're actually more likely to struggle to read and spell too. So Lip Letterland is designed to build that neural processing of sounds. It's part visual, it's part auditory, it's part your mouth movement, and it's part feeling where your mouth is touching. It's those four senses wiring together, what we call a 6-way multisensory interactive app. So for 3 to 6 year olds, we want them to play the app with a parent or with a caregiver, someone who engages with them, and really get them checking about what they feel their mouth doing. Simplest way is to say, lots of kids mix up B's and D's.
Yeah.
Because it's kind of hard to remember visually, they look a lot alike. But no one taught them that, hey, if you make the sound buh, your lips come together, your lips pop apart, and we can make a name for that. We can call it a lip popper. But when you make the sound for the D and say duh, it's not your lips that's working, it's your tongue. We're going to call that one a tongue tapper. And your brain now has a more explicit way to differentiate those sounds because we taught you more details. That's what Lip Letterland is going to do. It's going to teach you lip poppers and tongue tappers and tongue coolers and skinny airs and fat airs and tongue lifters, just all kind of fun, crazy sounding names, but they strengthen that speech processor, and then they go to the letters later.
You realize you talk about that. You are productizing an entire brand here with all those. I can see T-shirts with those names on them. I remember being with you once, and you gave me a test.
Mm-hmm.
I'd love to share that test. I think
Absolutely.
Yeah. What and this would be pertinent to our listeners
100%.
because
Because it helps them know if their child's likely to struggle or not struggle. And it's actually a sensitive, reliable test. And as Karen brought out, it's been studied. We have big longitudinal studies. So basically it means they measured about 20 skills on 5-year-olds and repeated the same measurements at age 6, 7, 8, 9. The question was what skill at age 4 or 5 predicted your reading skills at age 9, and it's this one task. We teach pediatricians to do this too at the 4-year-old well check. All they have to do is you say the word like cat, and you get your child to say it back to you. So Johnny says cat. You need to tell him, now Johnny, say cat again, but change it. Say cat, but don't say the k sound. Leave that off. And the Johnny who's not going to struggle to read and spell almost immediately just goes at. You give him a different word. You say flame. Johnny says flame. You say, now say flame. Don't say, oh, leave that out. And the Johnny who's not going to struggle to read just says fame almost immediately. You say baseball. He says baseball. You say, now say baseball. Don't say base. And he says ball. That's the predictor of your reading skills at age 4. It's called phoneme elision, which means sound takeaway. Can they take away a sound and put all the sounds back together?
So if I'm listening to this morning and I hear this and I go back to my child and I run this game,
Yeah.
and they struggle, what should my action take? Is it I just go get lip letter land and I'm good to go, or do I talk to my doctor? What is your thought on, or recommendation on the steps?
We have multiple options. That's part of our goal, is to create multiple pathways of information to parents.
Yeah.
One is, they can just try lip letter lang, because it's only going to help. And even if your child does well with saying cat without the k sound, lip letter lang is still going to help as well. It's just going to make their system even stronger. So it makes the strong kids stronger. It makes the weak kids stronger as well. So it's really an app designed for all 3 to 6-year-olds to strengthen their pre-literacy skills. But if the child struggles with it, you have several options. One, you can go to nowprograms.com, click on a free consultation, and I've got a team of about 120 people, and they do free consultations all day long with nowprograms.com. Or we have the Morris Center in Ponte Vedra Beach. You can contact the Morris Center. They do free consultations at the Morris Center. Help understand what your child's struggles are, give you information about it. Or you can go to the websites. Nowprograms.com has more information. TheMorrisCenter.com has more information. Or if your child has a speech pathologist because they're already working on some articulation, talk to your speech pathologist. Talk to your pediatrician. Most likely, most pediatricians themselves don't have much training in language development. They know milestones. But it's a developmental behavioral pediatrician that's a specialty group who really understands language development. And some folks already have their kids seeing a developmental behavioral pediatrician, and they should be able to educate you even more about what are the language risks and what can you do to close the gap before it gets bigger. Because that's what Karen was talking about. When there's a gap at age 7, if you don't do the right interventions, it's going to be bigger at 8, bigger at 9, bigger at 10. It just keeps getting bigger.
Karen, what are the gaps that you see in other parents' ability to find an answer? I know you said from a data standpoint, there's nothing out there. But I have to also imagine there's a fear factor.
Huge.
Yes. Talk
Huge
about
fear
that.
factor. One, there's guilt. Like, why didn't I see this before? What did I miss? How did they get so far? There's so many things. Like my daughter, when she came to the Morris Center, she was 15 years old.
Wow.
I'm in education, special education.
Mm-hmm.
How the heck did I not know she had dyslexia? Like,
Yeah.
what? Right?
Mm-hmm.
Then I have a little one who's struggling, just couldn't read because, again, dyslexia is this big name that everybody hears, and it's, oh, you look in the mirror and they see things in reverse. That's what you hear, right? Or they're right backwards. Well, guess what? That's not it. It could show up in comprehension. It can show up in math. It can show up just in all the things, right? And if school's just generally hard, that could be it. It could be this neurological deficit that they have that isn't a, learning disability per se, but just a weakness in phonological awareness, right? So, for me, as a parent, I would say it's the fear. It's, I don't even know where to look. What do I do? And then you have other parents, oh, just go try this program. Oh, just try this program. You don't know where to go to get the testing, or the testing costs $3,000 and insurance doesn't cover it. Or it's, okay, well, I'm just going to do the testing at school and let them tell me what to do. And they count on the school to remediate, but it doesn't close the gap.
Gotcha.
And most people don't know that schools typically don't diagnose. Schools do testing to actually categorize.
Right.
Do you qualify for this category of services? But if you truly want a diagnosis, you have to see a licensed neuropsychologist or a licensed speech pathologist. Many school psychologists are actually not licensed to practice outside of the school. So they actually don't have a license to diagnose. And schools don't want that liability.
Yeah.
So you really have to go out usually to the private sector to get a more thorough diagnosis.
You have to remember, the objective of a school is to help the children to access the current curriculum as it is. It's not to necessarily fully remediate.
Right.
It's for access. So the goal, it all depends on what your goal is as a parent and what your goal is as an educator. Sometimes they're not the same. And I think that's where a lot of folks aren't understanding. Like, they're not a doctor. They're not there to help you per se cure it or remediate it. It's, they just want you to be able to access and get through the day. And that's why you hear
Yeah.
how did they get there and graduate it? Well, because they were just accessing it.
It's this doesn't count anymore, but my uncle used to have a quote. He's like, "You don't go to a gas station to get dinner." Now we can, thank you. But it's like, it's what is that utilization? And if you throw in, I would imagine, I'm not a teacher, but the under-resourcing and the other constraints and resources, it really leaves a lot in the gap. Speaking of the gap, we've got about another 10 minutes or so before we step on, or 5 minutes, maybe 7 minutes. I don't know. I can't tell time. And I'd like to blame it on my dyslexia, but I can't do that. I can tell time. If you'd like to join us, please do. Oh, 2 minutes. Wow, I was really off. That was terrible. They're just laughing at me. 904-549-2937 if you have any last quick question or comments. Comments like Alexandria on Facebook. Dr. Conway is the epitome of professional and human qualities. So you definitely have a fan club. We do have only about 1:30 now, so I want to give you both a chance to have some closing comments. First of all, you, Karen, what do you most want parents to know that would not have to suffer the pain you've suffered? Very, very briefly.
If I had known about Lip Letter Land, that's what my children would have played when they were little. I remember going on looking at apps and reviews, just trying to figure it out. But you got to remember, language comes first. They learn how to talk first. And this is kind of what it's getting at, is telling their brain what to do with their mouth, which my son says that's what the difference was between him learning this versus the other ways of reading, which made a difference for him. So I would say that. And if you can, get a consultation. Like, even if you don't do it, get a consultation and see for yourself what the difference is, because you won't regret it.
Okay.
My kid's in 7th grade now, flourishing, writing 5-paragraph essays and reading whatever book he wants.
Dr. Conway, we have 15 seconds. What do you most want to say to people about Lip Letter Land?
I want to say that it's for every kid to help empower their literacy strengths, and there's no reason not to try it, because everyone benefits from stronger literacy skills.
Dr. Tim Conway and Karen Elliott, thank you both so much for being here.